I didn't betray you, Mr. Blackwood. Please, you have to believe me." A single sentence tore straight through the silence inside the Blackwood estate. Elena Reyes stood in the middle of the grand hall, her hands trembling, her eyes swimming with tears. Around her were dozens of elite guests, their looks sharp with judgment, their whispers venomous and eager. Dominic Blackwood stood in front of her, the most powerful Mafia boss in New York, his gray eyes cold as ice, not a flicker of softness in them. Victoria Langley stood at his side, tears sliding down her cheeks, perfect in every drop, as though she had rehearsed her whole life for this very moment. "Elena stole $2 million and your confidential documents," Victoria sobbed. "I saw it with my own eyes." In the corner of the room, Luca, a 7-year-old boy, screamed and fought in the nanny's arms. "Not Elena! She didn't do it! Dad!" But Dominic did not turn back. He only stared at Elena with the gaze of a man who believes he has just been betrayed. Minutes later, Elena was dragged away by 2 bodyguards in front of everyone, like a criminal. But the truth was far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. Behind those iron gates waited lies, betrayal, and a plot powerful enough to destroy everything, even the secrets that had been buried for 3 years. What was Victoria really hiding? And why did a 7-year-old boy hold the key to everything? Watch until the end. The final reveal will leave you breathless. If you love stories of betrayal and redemption, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Drop a like if you're ready for the truth to unfold. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? 2 hours earlier, the Blackwood estate blazed with splendor beneath crystal chandeliers. Hundreds of candles shimmered throughout the grand hall, white and yellow roses spilling into every corner, and Dom Perignon flowed like a spring. This was Victoria Langley's 32nd birthday celebration, Dominic Blackwood's mistress, and she had turned the place into the perfect stage for her performance. The guest list was New York's upper crust, business tycoons, politicians, and even Dominic's special partners, the kind everyone knew about but no one dared to say out loud what they truly did. Laughter, piano music, the clink of champagne glasses filled the air, yet in a shadowed corner of the room, Elena Reyes sat in silence with Luca. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pinned neatly up, trying to blend into the darkness. 2 years of work in this estate had taught her one important lesson. Someone like her should not be seen, only exist when needed, and disappear when no one needed her. But with Luca, everything was different. The 7-year-old boy pressed close to her, his head resting on her shoulder, his tiny hand gripping hers as if afraid she might vanish. "Elena, I hate these people," Luca whispered, his eyes fixed on the extravagant crowd. "They laugh, but their eyes are so cold." Elena smiled and smoothed his hair. "Just a little longer, sweetheart. Then we'll go back to the room and read a story, all right?" Luca looked up, his bright brown eyes lighting up. He pulled a small folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I have a gift for Elena." Elena took it, opened it, and her heart tightened as if it could not breathe. It was a crayon drawing, childish lines, clumsy and innocent, yet overflowing with feeling. In the picture were 3 people, a woman with long black hair, a small boy, and a tall man. Underneath, Luca had scribbled in unsteady letters, "My family." Elena stared at the drawing, then at Luca. "You drew your father with us?" The boy nodded, his voice pure and matter-of-fact. "Because Elena makes Dad laugh. He doesn't laugh with anyone else. Only when Dad looks at Elena with me, he smiles." Elena did not know what to say. She pressed the picture to her chest, fighting back tears. She was only the caretaker, only hired help. She had no right to dream of things like family, especially in a place like this. But her heart did not obey her mind. Across the room, Dominic Blackwood stood among the crowd, a glass of whiskey in his hand, but his eyes were not on the important guests. His cold, gray gaze had settled on that corner, where Elena held Luca, where his son was smiling, a smile he rarely saw. A memory surged up without warning. Catherine, his wife, had once sat like that with Luca too, had stroked his hair, had pulled that same laugh out of him. But Catherine had been gone for 3 years, and Dominic had believed that Smile had died with her. He shook his head, forcing the thought away. He should not look at Elena like that. She was just the help, just the nanny, nothing more. He turned aside, took a sip of whiskey, tried to focus on his conversation with a partner, yet inside him, something had begun to crack without his noticing. Not far away, Adrian Cross quietly slipped out his phone when a new message appeared. His handsome face did not change, but his eyes flashed with something, greed or fear, hard to tell. Adrian glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then slipped into the hallway. He stopped in a hidden corner and dialed a number. The documents are in the safe. Tonight. The voice on the other end was ice cold, a distinctly Russian voice. Don't disappoint me, Adrian. You know what happened to the last one who failed me. Adrian swallowed hard. I understand, Victor. Good. Midnight. Don't be late. The call ended. Adrian stood there for a moment, sweat beading on his forehead even though the corridor was cool. 10 years as Dominic's right hand. 10 years of absolute trust. And now he was about to betray everything. But Viktor Petrov was not a man you could refuse. Adrian drew a slow breath, steadied himself, then returned to the party as if nothing had happened. In the grand hall, Victoria moved through the crowd with a radiant smile, her gold gown gleaming like a queen. She paused in the corner where Elena sat with Luca. Victoria bent down, pretending to stroke Luca's hair, but her icy blue eyes locked onto Elena. Enjoy the party while it lasts, she murmured, her voice sweet, yet soaked in poison. After tonight, you're finished. Then Victoria straightened, flashed her perfect smile at the guests, and walked away as if she had offered nothing more than a polite greeting. Elena remained there, her heart hammering, not fully understanding what Victoria had just said. She looked down at the drawing in her hand, Luca's drawing, and wondered why she suddenly felt, deep in her bones, that this was the last night she would ever belong in this place. 15 minutes after whispering to Elena, Victoria quietly slipped out of the grand hall. She glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then eased into the east corridor, where the light could not reach. Adrian was already there waiting, his back against the wall, a half-burned cigarette between his fingers. When he saw Victoria, he stubbed it out and stepped forward. Is everything ready? Victoria asked, her voice low. Adrian nodded. Dominic will be in his office at 10 o'clock. He has a call with the Medellin partner. It will last at least 30 minutes. I'll handle the cameras. You go in and take the documents. Victoria bit her lip. And the money? There are $2 million in cash in the safe. Adrian looked at her, a cold smile forming at the corner of his mouth. Take that too. We'll pin it on the Mexican girl. Elena? Victoria lifted an eyebrow, then let out a soft laugh. Her? Why? Poor. Desperate. Easy. Adrian answered, clipped and simple. Husband, dead. Elderly mother sick. Little daughter sent back to Mexico. Everyone will believe it. An immigrant servant pushed to the edge, making a reckless choice. A perfect story. Victoria nodded, her blue eyes glittering with cruelty. I hate that girl. The way Luca looks at her. The way Dominic looks at her, like she's something special. Her jaw tightened. She's just a servant. Just trash. And she dares to act like she's the lady of this house. Adrian lifted his hand to Victoria's cheek, his finger stroking lightly. After tonight, she'll be nothing. Dominic will throw her out like a thieving dog. And you? He leaned in, his mouth close to hers. You will be the true mistress of this place. Victoria shivered with pleasure. She rose onto her toes and kissed Adrian, a kiss heavy with ambition and hunger. The two traitors stood there in the darkness, mouths locked together, while in the grand hall, Dominic Blackwood was still raising his glass with the guests, unaware that his mistress and his right hand were planning to ruin him. When the kiss ended, Adrian pulled a small USB drive from his pocket. The safe password is on here. I copied it from Dominic's system. It changes every week, but I always get it first. Victoria took it and slipped it into her bodice. After I take the documents, what do I do with them? Give them to me. I'll handle the rest. Adrian replied, his voice calm. But inside his mind, a different thought was moving fast. Victor wanted the documents before midnight. Files on the Medellin transactions. The list of people inside the network. Proof of every Blackwood job over the past 10 years. With those in hand, Viktor Petrov would have the power to destroy the Blackwood Empire, or take it for himself. And when everything was done, Adrian looked at Victoria, at her greedy blue eyes, and felt only a cold contempt. Victoria thought she was using him. She thought that once they took Dominic's money, the two of them would run away together and live in luxury somewhere. How stupid. Victor never left loose ends. Victoria would become a loose end, a danger that needed to be dealt with, just like everyone else who had ever stood in Victor's way. Just like Miguel Reyes 3 years earlier, Adrian still remembered that night. A convenience store clerk, in the wrong place at the wrong time, accidentally seeing what he was never meant to see. Victor had given the order, and Miguel Reyes vanished from the world, leaving behind a young widow and a 2-year-old daughter. No one knew the truth. The police called it a robbery. The case was closed, clean, and now that widow was inside this very house, caring for Dominic Blackwood's son. with no idea that the man who killed her husband was pulling every string from the shadows. Fate was cruelly ironic. Adrian almost laughed. 10 o'clock, he said, giving Victoria a light push back. Don't be late. Victoria nodded, her eyes blazing. I won't be late. After tonight, everything will change. She turned and strode back toward the grand hall, her gold dress glinting even in the darkness. Adrian stood there watching her, his eyes cold as ice. She had no idea what was waiting for her. She thought she was a player, but she was only a piece on the board, and pieces were always sacrificed. Adrian pulled out his phone and typed a short message to Victor. Everything is on schedule. You'll have the documents by midnight. The message sent. Adrian slipped the phone back into his pocket, drew a slow breath, then stepped out of the darkness and returned to the party wearing the perfect smile of a loyal right-hand man. No one knew the snake had been living right in the middle of the house. At exactly 10 o'clock that night, Dominic Blackwood's phone began to vibrate. He glanced at the screen. It was the call from the Medellin partner, the kind of call he could not afford to miss. Dominic excused himself from the guests and left the grand hall, heading straight to his private office on the second floor. The room had been built like a fortress. A steel door, surveillance cameras, and a safe concealed behind an old oil painting. Every secret of the Blackwood Empire lived inside that room. Dominic sat down in his chair and lifted the phone. "Si, habla Blackwood." The call went on. Numbers, deals, promises. Dominic had no idea that out in the hallway, Adrian was standing guard, a small remote in his hand that controlled the camera system. One press, and every camera on the second floor went dead. Adrian tapped the wall 3 times, a quiet signal for Victoria. At the far end of the corridor, Victoria appeared from the service stairwell, moving as lightly as a cat. She had changed clothes, no longer in the dazzling gold gown, but in tight black clothing, her hair pulled high, black gloves on her hands. Victoria slipped to the back door of the office, the door Adrian had unlocked in advance. She turned the knob gently. The door opened without a sound. Inside, she could hear Dominic's voice on the phone in the outer room, separated by a thick wall. Perfect. Victoria moved quickly to the oil painting and lifted it away, revealing the face of a black steel safe. She pulled the USB drive from inside her bodice, plugged it into the small port beside the safe, and entered the password Adrian had provided. The tiny screen flickered green. The safe opened with a soft click. Victoria's eyes lit up at what waited inside. Dozens of thick folders, contracts, name lists, proof of every underground deal Blackwood had made over the past 10 years. And beside them, neat stacks of cash, $2 million in total. Victoria did not waste a second. She stuffed all the documents into a black bag she had prepared, then reached for the money. $2 million. Enough to start a new life. Enough to become the woman she had always wanted to be. She packed the cash into a second bag, leaving $10,000 in her hand. That money had a different purpose. Victoria closed the safe, but deliberately did not lock it. She wanted Dominic to discover it the moment he returned. She wanted him to know he had been betrayed, but he would not know who had done it, because she had already prepared the perfect scapegoat. Victoria slipped out through the back door, where Adrian was waiting. She handed him the bag of documents. "It's done. Everything is here." Adrian took the bag, checked quickly, then nodded. "Good. Now go finish the rest." Victoria smiled with cruelty, then disappeared into the darkness. She went down to the first floor, slipped through the servants' hallway, and stopped in front of a plain wooden door, Elena Reyes's room. Victoria opened the door and stepped inside. The room was small, clean, and so simple it was almost painful. A narrow bed, an old wardrobe, a small table with a few photographs. Victoria glanced at the photos. A young man smiling, a little girl about 2 years old, an elderly woman with a gentle smile, Elena's family. Victoria gave a dismissive snort. Pathetic. She went to the bed, lifted the pillow, and slid the $10,000 underneath. "The perfect scapegoat," Victoria whispered, lowering the pillow back into place. "Poor, desperate, and no one will believe a word she says." She left the room and closed the door softly, then returned to the party as if nothing had happened. Outside the estate, Adrian sat in his car with the phone to his ear. "It's done. The documents are being sent." Viktor Petrov's voice came through from the other side, cold and triumphant. "Excellent. The Blackwood Empire will fall. And this time, no one can stop me." He gave a quiet laugh, a laugh full of malice. Not like that clerk 3 years ago. He thought he could run. He thought he could hide what he saw. But no one escapes Viktor Petrov. Adrian said nothing. He knew exactly who Victor was talking about. Miguel Reyes, a nobody convenience store clerk who had accidentally witnessed one of Victor's shipments and paid for it with his life. His widow was now inside the Blackwood estate, about to be framed for theft, with no idea that the man who had killed her husband was smiling on the other end of the line. "I understand," Adrian said. "There won't be any problems. Good. By midnight, the documents must be in my hands." Victor hung up. Adrian stared at the bag of documents on the passenger seat, then started the engine. Tonight, the Blackwood empire would begin to collapse, and no one knew it was coming. Inside the estate, Dominic Blackwood had just ended the call. He rose, rubbing his forehead with fatigue, then walked toward his desk to grab a document he would need for tomorrow. He passed the oil painting and stopped. Something was wrong. The painting was slightly crooked. Dominic reached up and lifted it away, and his heart seemed to stop. The safe stood open, empty. $2 million. The files on every deal, the list of everyone inside the system, gone. Dominic Blackwood's face shifted from shock to rage. For weeks, he had sensed something off Adrian's shifting eyes, Victoria's probing questions about the safe. He had planned to investigate them. But staring at the empty steel void, that cold logic shattered. The loss was too catastrophic. The identity of every partner, every route gone. The sheer terror of his empire's collapse drowned out his intuition, leaving only blind, destructive fury. Then, his expression turned into something even more frightening. The absolute coldness of a mafia boss who has just been betrayed. Dominic Blackwood walked down into the grand hall, each step heavy as lead. The music was still playing. The guests were still laughing and talking, but it all cut off the moment they saw his face. It was the face of a mafia boss who had just been stabbed in the back, cold, dangerous, and ready to kill. "Turn the music off," he ordered, not loudly, yet his voice carried through the room. The music stopped. Everyone froze, no one daring to breathe too hard. Dominic stood in the center of the hall, his gray eyes sweeping across every face. $2 million in cash and my confidential documents are gone from my safe, he said, each word like ice. "Someone in this room is a traitor." A murmur rose, shocked, panicked. Someone had dared to steal from Dominic Blackwood. That was suicide. Victoria was the first to react. She stepped to Dominic's side, her eyes rimmed red, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Dominic, I don't want to say this, but..." She hesitated, as if wrestling with her conscience. "But I saw something." "Say it," Dominic replied, his eyes never leaving the crowd. Victoria drew a deep breath, then turned and looked toward the corner of the room, where Elena stood beside Luca. "I saw Elena go upstairs about an hour ago. She said she was getting something for Luca, but she was gone for a long time. I don't want to accuse her, but..." She broke into sobs, every tear perfectly placed. Every gaze swung toward Elena. She stood there, gripping Luca's hand, her heart pounding. She did not understand what was happening. Adrian stepped forward, his face grave. "Boss, I just checked the camera system. The cameras on the second floor were shut off for about 30 minutes, from 10 o'clock to 10:30. He glanced at Elena. During that time, Elena was the only one not in the grand hall. "That's a lie." Elena stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "I only took Luca to the bathroom and got his coat. I didn't go up to Mr. Blackwood's office." Victoria turned to her, her expression full of false pity. "Elena, I understand you're scared. You have a hard life. Your husband is gone. Your mother is very sick in Mexico. Your little girl needs money to live. $2 million could change everything. I don't blame you. But..." Elena went numb when Victoria spoke her husband's name. Miguel, the man she had loved, the man whose life had been stolen 3 years ago in a so-called robbery the police never solved. Why did Victoria know about Miguel? Why was she saying it like that? "I didn't take anything," Elena said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Someone is setting me up." Dominic looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Search her room." 2 bodyguards stepped forward and escorted Elena back to her room. She did not fight, because she knew she was innocent. She had nothing to fear. But 5 minutes later, when a guard returned with a stack of cash in his hand, Elena's world collapsed. Found under her pillow. "Boss, $10,000. A deadly silence. Elena stared at the money, unable to believe her eyes. "That isn't mine. Someone put it there. I swear, I didn't take anything." Victoria shook her head sadly. "Elena, don't make this worse. You were caught. Just accept it. I didn't take it." Elena screamed, desperate. "Mr. Blackwood, please believe me. I've worked here for 2 years. I've never taken a single thing." Dominic stood there, silent. In his cold gray eyes, a war was being fought, but no one could see it. Suddenly, a small shape burst through the crowd. Elena didn't do it. Luca ran to Elena and clung to her, tears pouring down his face. "Elena was with me. She didn't take anything. Dad, please don't do this." Victoria stepped in, trying to pull Luca away. "Luca, sweetheart, this is grown-up business. You don't understand." But Luca wrenched free, his eyes red and blazing. "I do understand. I understand more than you think." The boy turned toward Victoria, and what he said next made the entire room turn to ice. "I saw you and Mr. Adrian. In the dark, you kissed him." Victoria went pale, only for a beat, but Elena saw it. Panic flashed through those blue eyes before it was masked by sorrowful concern. "Oh, Luca," Victoria sighed, her voice thick with pity. "You love Elena so much that you're imagining things. I understand, but you can't make up stories to protect her." Victoria turned to Dominic, her eyes shining with tears. "Do you see? She's taught your son to lie to cover her guilt. Is this the kind of person you want around Luca?" Dominic looked at his son, looked at Elena, looked at Victoria. The room was so silent it felt like the air could not move. Then he spoke, his voice cold as ice. "Take her away." 2 bodyguards stepped in and seized Elena's arms. She did not fight, because she knew it was useless. But before they dragged her off, she looked Dominic straight in the eyes. "I didn't betray you, Mr. Blackwood. Please, you have to believe me." Dominic did not answer, yet for one moment, one brief moment, Elena saw something in his gray eyes. Not rage, not contempt, but pain, as if he were tearing himself apart just to say those words. Then the moment passed, and his eyes turned icy again. Elena was dragged away, Luca's screaming echoing behind her. Elena was dragged across the grand hall by 2 bodyguards, past guests who stared at her with contempt and judgment. People who, just hours ago, would not even bother to look at her were now whispering, smirking, savoring the collapse of a house servant accused of theft. Elena forced herself to keep her head high, to keep the tears from falling. She would not let them see her break. She would not let Victoria taste victory. But when she passed the corner of the room where she and Luca had sat only hours earlier, her heart splintered. "Elena!" Luca's voice tore through the air. The little boy wrenched free of Victoria's hands and ran toward Elena, his small feet stumbling over the marble floor. "Elena, don't go. Please, don't go." The guards paused as Luca threw himself forward and wrapped his arms around Elena's legs, tears soaking his tiny face. "Don't go," he sobbed. "I don't want you to go. I need you. Please don't leave me." Elena dropped to her knees, even as the bodyguards still held her arms. She looked into Luca's brown eyes, flooded with tears. Eyes she had looked into every day for 2 years. The eyes of a child she loved as if he were her own. "Luca, listen to me," Elena whispered, her voice breaking, yet steady beneath the pain. "I have to go now. But do you remember what I taught you?" Luca nodded, tears still spilling. "The truth doesn't need anyone's permission to exist," Elena said, placing her hand against his cheek. "Remember that. No matter what happens, the truth will always find a way to rise. Do you understand?" "I understand," Luca hiccuped. "But I don't want you to go." "I know, sweetheart. I don't want to either." Elena kissed his forehead. "But you have to be strong. For me. All right?" Victoria stepped in and pulled Luca away from Elena. "That's enough. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Luca fought and screamed, but Victoria held him tight. Elena was hauled toward the door, each step tearing at her heart. She looked back one last time. At Luca. At the boy crying her name, his small arms reaching for her as if trying to hold on to something slipping out of reach. Then the door slammed shut. Luca's crying was cut off. Elena stood outside the estate in the cold night, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a shattered heart. That night, when the mansion had gone quiet, when the guests had left, when Victoria had gone to bed wearing her victorious smile, Dominic Blackwood sat alone in his office. The safe still gaped open, empty, like a wound that would not heal. But he was not looking at the safe. He was looking at something else. On his desk lay Luca's drawing, the drawing the boy had given Elena tonight, the drawing the guards had found on the floor when Elena was dragged away. 3 figures, a woman with long black hair, a small boy, a tall man. "My family." Dominic lifted the drawing, his fingers trembling slightly. His son had drawn Elena as part of the family. His son had screamed and cried when she was thrown out. His son had said she was innocent. Dominic opened a drawer and took out an old photograph. Catherine, His wife. The woman who had died 3 years earlier from illness, leaving him alone to raise Luca. In the picture, Catherine was smiling, her eyes gentle, her brown hair caught in the wind. "She's like you, Catherine," Dominic murmured, staring at the photo. The same quiet strength, the same warmth with Luca, the same eyes that don't know how to lie. He closed his eyes, pain tightening his face. Did I just destroy an innocent woman? Again? A knock at the door cut through his thoughts. Adrian stepped in, his expression grave. "Boss, I'm tracing the documents. Elena may have sold them to someone before she was caught. I'll find the buyer." Dominic nodded, but his eyes remained dark. "Do it." Adrian lowered his head and left the room. He walked down the corridor and out onto the back balcony, where no one could see him. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Blackwood is distracted," Adrian said when Victor answered. "He suspects nothing. He's busy grieving over throwing out the Mexican girl." Victor Petrov's laughter came through the line, cold and triumphant. "Perfect. Just like 3 years ago with that convenience store clerk." "What was his name again?" "Miguel Reyes." Victor gave a cruel chuckle. "His widow is about to learn a lesson. Some secrets are never meant to stay buried forever." Elena could not remember how she made it back to her Brooklyn apartment. She only remembered walking, and walking, through the cold night streets, past flickering streetlights, past unfamiliar faces that did not bother to look at her. By the time she opened the door to her tiny studio, her legs were numb from cold and exhaustion. The apartment was pitch dark, cramped, the walls stained and mottled, the light trembling as if it were about to die. This was where she had lived before Dominic Blackwood hired her. The place she kept because she knew life in that mansion was never meant to last. And she had been right. Elena sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the lamp, without changing her clothes. She only sat there in the dark, staring into nothing. On the bedside table, 2 photographs lay in silence. One was Miguel, her husband, smiling, his warm brown eyes steady, his thick black hair softly tousled. He wore the white shirt she had bought him for his birthday that year, the last year they had together. The other was Mia, her daughter, 5 years old, grinning wide, 2 baby teeth missing, her hair tied on both sides like little pigtails. Mia was in Mexico, living with Grandma Rosa, because Elena could not afford to raise her in New York. She sent money home every month, called every day, but it had been 2 years since she had held her little girl in her arms. Elena picked up her phone and dialed. The line rang 3 times, then her mother's voice came through, weak but warm. "Hola, Mija." "Mama," Elena said, trying to keep her voice normal. "I'm calling to check on you. How are you feeling?" "Mama is fine, my daughter. Mia is asleep already. She misses you so much. Today she drew a picture for you. 3 people holding hands." Elena closed her eyes, tears rising fast. 3 people, Miguel, Elena, and Mia, a family that no longer existed. "I'll send money for your medicine this week," Elena said, her voice trembling slightly. "Make sure you take it, Mama. Are you all right, Mija? Your voice sounds strange." "I'm fine, Mama. Just a little tired from working too much," she lied. She could not tell her mother she had just been fired, framed, treated like a criminal. Her mother was sick, her heart fragile. She could not take more stress. "Mama loves you, Elena. Take care of yourself." "I love you, Mama." Elena ended the call and let the phone fall onto the bed. She stared at Miguel's photograph, and memory surged over her like a flood. 3 years earlier, that night, Elena was feeding Mia a bottle when there was a knock at the door. 2 police officers stood outside, their faces hard and serious. "Mrs. Reyes, your husband has been killed in a robbery." Elena could not remember how she reacted. She only remembered holding Mia, only 2 years old then, crying without sound, while the little girl slept peacefully in her mother's arms, never knowing her father would never come home again. The police said they could not identify the shooter. No cameras, no witnesses. The file was closed, stamped as a cold case, but Elena had always felt something was wrong. Miguel was only a convenience store clerk. He had no money, no enemies, no reason for anyone to want him dead. A robbery, but robbed of what? He did not even carry his wallet because it was a night shift and he kept it in his employee locker. Something did not add up, but Elena never found the answer. The days that followed after she was thrown out of the Blackwood estate were even worse. On the first day, Elena called the agency that supplied household staff, the one that had placed her with the Blackwoods. "Sorry, we can't help you. There's an issue with your file." On the 3rd day, she went in person to a family looking for help. The woman opened the door, looked Elena up and down, then slammed it in her face. "We don't hire thieves. The rumors had already spread. She stole from a Mafia boss. $2 million, that's what I heard. Suicidal. How much longer do you think she'll stay alive? Elena had been blacklisted. No one in New York would hire her. Not because they believed she was guilty, but because no one wanted to be tangled up with Dominic Blackwood. She became invisible. A ghost drifting through the city. No job, no future, no hope. On the 7th night, Elena stood in front of the bathroom mirror. She studied her face, hollowed out, pale, yet her eyes still held firm. No tears. She had cried enough. They took my husband, she said to her own reflection, her voice hard as steel. They took my job. They took my dignity. But they will not take my child's future. Elena did not know that they were not only Victoria. She did not know that the one behind everything, the one who had killed her husband 3 years earlier, was watching her from the darkness, and that she was only a piece in a game far bigger than she could imagine. A week passed like a nightmare with no end in sight. Elena survived day to day on hurried meals, sleepless nights, and phone calls to Mexico, where she had to keep her voice steady so her mother and her daughter would not worry. Her savings were drying up, and she still could not find work. That night, Elena had just returned to her apartment after another long day of searching and failing. She climbed the stairs in exhaustion, her legs heavy as if weighted with lead, but when she reached her door, she stopped short. A small figure was curled up in front of the apartment, knees pulled tight to his chest, face buried in his hands. Luca? Elena could not believe her eyes. The boy lifted his head, his brown eyes swollen from crying, his little face streaked with tears. Elena. Luca sprang to his feet and threw himself into her arms, clinging to her as if she might disappear. I ran away. I can't take it anymore. I can't stay there anymore. Elena dropped to her knees and held him close, her heart twisting as if someone's hand had closed around it. How had a 7-year-old made it here alone? How far had he gone? Had anyone hurt him? Luca, how did you get here? Was anyone with you? I took a taxi. Luca choked out. I remembered your address from the time Dad gave you a ride. I took money from Victoria's drawer and called a taxi. Elena did not know whether to cry or laugh. A 7-year-old had been smart enough, and desperate enough, to do all of that just to reach her. She opened the apartment door and brought Luca inside. The room was small and shabby, nothing like the Blackwood estate. But Luca did not care. He sat pressed against Elena on the old bed, his hand gripping hers as if afraid someone would come and pull her away again. Tell me what happened, Elena said gently. Why did you run away? Luca drew a shaky breath, his eyes red. Victoria is mean, Elena. When Dad isn't home, she calls me a brat. She won't let me have dinner because I won't call her mom. She says I'm useless, just like my real mother. Elena clenched her jaw, fighting the anger rising in her chest. Victoria had dared to treat Luca like that. The child Dominic loved more than anything. But that's not all, Luca went on, his voice dropping, as if he was afraid someone might hear. I heard Victoria on the phone. She was talking about someone named Victor, and she talked about some documents. She said, after the wedding, everything will be ours. Elena went still. Victor. Did you hear the name clearly? Victor Petrov. Luca nodded. Yes, Petrov. I heard it. Elena's blood seemed to freeze in her veins. Victor Petrov. She knew that name. Who in New York did not? The Russian Mafia boss, Dominic Blackwood's sworn enemy. The man who had tried to take Blackwood territory for years. If Victoria was connected to Victor Petrov, then that meant... Elena, there's something else, Luca said, his voice trembling. It's really important. Tell me, sweetheart. I heard Mr. Adrian talking to Victoria. He said something really strange. Luca frowned, trying to pull the exact words from his memory. He said, Victor already handled the problem before, just like that Mexican guy. Then Victoria laughed. Elena felt as if someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over her. That Mexican guy. Did you hear anything else? She asked, her voice turning rough. Did they say a name? Luca shook his head. No, that's all I heard. But they laughed in a really scary way, like it was a joke. That Mexican guy. Victor had handled it. Elena closed her eyes, trying to push back the wild thought taking shape in her mind. It could not be. It was only a coincidence, wasn't it? Miguel was Mexican. Miguel was killed. The case was never solved. No, it could not be. The ring of the phone cut through Elena's thoughts. The number from the Blackwood estate, she answered. Elena Reyes. Victoria's voice came through, cold and threatening. I know Luca is there. Bring him back right now, or I'll call the police and report that you kidnapped him. Elena wanted to scream in that woman's face, but but she knew that was exactly what Victoria wanted. "I will call Mr. Blackwood," Elena said, keeping her voice calm. "Luca is safe. I want to speak to him, not you." Victoria's teeth seemed to grind on the other end. "Who do you think you are? You're nothing but a stealing servant. Bring Luca back now. Put Mr. Blackwood on the phone." Elena ended the call. 20 minutes later, Dominic's car arrived. Marco Santini, Dominic's loyal bodyguard, stepped out. He did not speak. He only looked at Elena with a complicated expression, then held out his hand to Luca. Luca hugged Elena one last time, then whispered into her ear, his voice startlingly firm for a 7-year-old. "I'm going to find proof. I'm going to record them. I'm going to prove you're innocent." Elena held him tight, tears running down her face. "Be careful, sweetheart. Don't do anything dangerous." Luca nodded, then followed Marco to the car. Elena stood there and watched the vehicle disappear into the night. But inside her head, only one question kept echoing, again and again. Who was that Mexican guy? Luca returned to the Blackwood estate with a mission burning inside him. The 7-year-old was no longer the innocent child who only knew how to cry and beg. He had a plan. In the days that followed, Luca became the perfect little boy. He stopped resisting Victoria. He did not mention Elena. He did nothing that might raise suspicion. When Victoria told him to come down for dinner, he went down obediently. When Victoria told him to go to bed, he went to his room without complaint. He even called Victoria auntie, in a voice so sweet she could not hide her satisfaction. "See, Dominic," Victoria said to Dominic over dinner. "He just needed time. Now he understands." Dominic looked at his son, his expression complicated. He said nothing, only nodded. But Luca knew his father was still hurting. Every night, Luca saw him sitting alone in his office, staring at the drawing Luca had made, the one with Elena in it. Luca waited. He watched. He learned that Victoria and Adrian often met at night, when Dominic was away on business or already asleep. They met in the wine room downstairs, where there were no cameras because Dominic believed it was a safe part of the house. On the 5th night after Luca ran away to see Elena, the opportunity came. Dominic had a late meeting with a partner and would not be back before midnight. Luca pretended to go to bed early, waited until he heard Victoria's footsteps going down the stairs, then slipped out of his room. He brought his iPad with him, a birthday gift from his father, and opened the voice recording app in advance. His heart hammered as he crept down the stairs, keeping close to the wall, moving toward the wine room. The wine room door was slightly open, warm light spilling out. Luca heard Victoria and Adrian's voices inside. He slipped in and hid behind a thick velvet curtain, holding his breath. The iPad was recording. "Victor is very pleased," Adrian's voice said. "He's using the documents to approach Medellin. If everything goes smoothly, Blackwood will lose all his Mexican partners within a month." "And Dominic still suspects nothing?" Victoria asked, her voice full of delight. Adrian gave a cold laugh. "He's too busy grieving over his dead wife and that Mexican girl. He's even wondering if he threw out the wrong person." "Ridiculous." Victoria laughed loudly, a laugh that sounded cold and cruel. Poor Elena. She has no idea her husband saw something he wasn't supposed to see. Luca stood behind the curtain, his heart pounding so hard he was afraid they would hear it. Elena's husband. He remembered Elena had mentioned a husband, a man who died 3 years ago. Miguel Reyes, Adrian said, as if he were telling a joke. Wrong place, wrong time. He worked at the convenience store near Victor's warehouse and happened to see a shipment. Victor doesn't leave witnesses. Victoria made a contemptuous sound, and now his widow is taking the blame for us. How poetic, isn't it? They laughed together, the laughter of people with no hearts, people who treated human life like trash. Luca stood there, his hands shaking, his eyes wide with horror. Miguel Reyes, Elena's husband. Victor had killed him, and now they were framing Elena, the widow of the man they had murdered. The 7-year-old felt something shift inside him. No longer just fear or simple anger. It was disgust, a deep, bone-level revulsion toward the people sitting there laughing about the death of an innocent man. This was not only about money. This was not only about documents. This was about a human life. Elena had lost her husband because of these people. Mia had lost her father because of these people, and they were laughing. "So what's the next plan?" Victoria asked. "What does Victor want now?" "Keep Dominic under control. After the wedding, you'll have access to all his accounts. Then we drain him and disappear. Victor will take care of the rest. And Luca? The kid doesn't matter. He's just a child. No one believes a child." Luca clenched his teeth. No one believes a child. He would show them. He had enough. The recording had been running for more than 5 minutes, enough to accuse them, enough to prove Elena innocent, enough to expose everything. He stopped the iPad, slid it into the pocket of his pajamas, and began to back away. Step by step, carefully. Not a sound. He was close to the door now. Just a few more steps. He turned, ready to slip out. And Victoria was standing right in front of him, blocking the doorway, her icy blue eyes looking down at him. "What are you doing here, you little brat?" Luca stood frozen, his brown eyes wide with horror as he stared at Victoria. She stood there like a ghost risen from hell, her cold blue eyes fixed on him. Adrian appeared behind her, blocking every path of escape. "I asked you," Victoria snarled as she stepped closer. "What are you doing down here?" Luca backed up a step, his arms tightening around the iPad against his chest without even thinking. I just came down to get water." "Get water." Victoria curled her lips, her gaze dropping to the iPad in the boy's hands. "Getting water, and you need an iPad for that." She lunged and ripped the iPad out of Luca's grip before he could react. Luca tried to wrestle it back, but he was only 7 years old. How could he fight an adult? Victoria looked at the screen, and her face shifted. The recording app was still running. 6 minutes and 23 seconds. "You were spying on me," Victoria roared, her eyes blazing. "You dare spy on me." Luca did not step back again. He was terrified, shaking so hard he could feel it in his bones. But he thought of Elena, thought of the promise he had made, thought of the man named Miguel who had died for nothing. He lifted his chin and looked Victoria straight in the eyes. "I know what you did. You framed Elena. You and Mr. Adrian stole the money and the documents and blamed her." Victoria went pale. Adrian stepped forward, his face hardening. "How much did you hear?" Luca did not stop. Tears ran down his cheeks, but his voice stayed firm. "I heard everything. Victor killed Elena's husband, Miguel Reyes. He killed an innocent man. And you were laughing about it." A deadly silence fell. Victoria and Adrian looked at each other, then looked back at Luca. In their eyes there was no longer contempt or anger, but something far more dangerous, cold calculation. "All right," Victoria said, her voice turning calm in a way that was frightening. "You heard a lot." She looked down at the iPad and opened the recording file. 6 minutes and 23 seconds. Enough to destroy her. Enough to send her to prison, or worse, into Dominic Blackwood's hands once he learned the truth. Victoria pressed delete. The recording vanished. Luca stared at the screen, eyes wide. "No, you can't delete it." Victoria smiled, cold and triumphant. "Deleted. No proof. Nothing left. Just the words of a 7-year-old boy." She tossed the iPad onto a chair and stepped close to Luca, lowering herself until she was eye level with him. "You think you're a hero. You think you can save your little Mexican girl. You're just a child. No one will believe you. My dad will believe me." Luca screamed, tears pouring down his face. "I'll tell him. He'll know the truth." Victoria shook her head, speaking as if she were soothing a wounded animal. "Your father believes me. Not you, not your Elena. He loves me, he's going to marry me, and he will never believe the words of a jealous child who makes things up." She straightened, her blue eyes flashing with cruelty. "But if you keep trying, if you even dare to say one word to anyone, I will make sure Elena disappears, forever." Luca went still. Victor knows how to handle problems. He's done it before. Elena's husband is the example. Victoria smiled, a serpent's smile. "Do you want Elena to die like her husband? One shot. No witnesses. No one ever finds the killer. That's how easy it is." Luca trembled, tears still falling. He thought of Elena, of her warm smile, of the way she held him at night, of the way she had said, "The truth doesn't need anyone's permission to exist." He could not let Elena die. He could not. "Do you understand?" Victoria asked, her voice sweet in a way that made his stomach turn. Luca nodded, broken. "I understand. Good. Now go back to your room. And remember, not one word to anyone, or Elena dies." Victoria rose and glanced at Adrian. "He's just a child. Not worth worrying about." Adrian nodded, but his eyes stayed on Luca with suspicion. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. He's scared stiff. Look at him, shaking like a leaf." They walked away, their mocking laughter echoing down the corridor. Luca stood there alone, tears still on his face, his hands still trembling, but once their footsteps faded, the boy slowly looked down at his own hands. In the pocket of his pajama top, the old phone from the gardener that he had borrowed earlier was still there. Victoria never checked. She only cared about the iPad. She did not know Luca had learned something from Elena. Always have a backup plan. He pulled the phone out and stared at the screen. The call was still active. Duration: 1824. He had dialed Marco's number before, hiding behind the curtain, and simply left the line open. Victoria thought she had won. She thought she had deleted every scrap of proof. But she did not know that a 7-year-old had been one step ahead of her. Luca slipped the phone back into his pocket, wiped his tears away, and quietly returned to his room. She would learn soon enough that you should never underestimate a child who loves someone with his whole heart. Marco Santini was sitting in the security room when his phone rang. It was the gardener's number. He frowned but answered the call. He didn't speak, expecting the old man. But instead, he heard voices. Victoria and Adrian, clear and sharp. He immediately pressed the record button and listened, his blood turning to ice. The first seconds were only a soft rustling. Then voices came through. Victoria and Adrian, clear and sharp. Victor is very pleased. He's using the documents to approach Medellin, and Dominic still suspects nothing. He's too busy grieving over his dead wife and that Mexican girl. Marco shot to his feet, his face changing. He kept listening, and with every passing second, his blood seemed to turn to ice. Poor Elena. She has no idea her husband saw something he wasn't supposed to see. Miguel Reyes. Wrong place, wrong time. Victor doesn't leave witnesses. And now his widow is taking the blame for us. How poetic, isn't it? The file ended. Marco stood there, his fist clenched around the phone until his knuckles went white. 20 years at Dominic Blackwood's side, 20 years of seeing everything, but he had never felt fury like this. Adrian, that bastard. 10 years trusted like a brother, and he betrayed Dominic like this. Marco did not hesitate. He ran straight to Dominic's office and pounded on the door. "Boss, you need to hear this. Right now." Dominic opened the door, eyes red from lack of sleep. A glass of whiskey in his hand. He had not slept well since the night he threw Elena out. "What is it, Marco?" "It's almost midnight." "Boss, listen to this." Marco held out the phone. "Luca called me and left the line open. I recorded this just now. You need to hear it." Dominic frowned, but he took the phone and pressed play. And then he heard it. Victoria and Adrian's voices filled the silent room, every word like a blade driven straight into his heart. Victor killed him. Miguel Reyes. Wrong place, wrong time. His widow is taking the blame for us. Dominic stood there, frozen like stone. The whiskey glass in his hand trembled, then slipped and shattered on the floor. He did not pick it up. He could not move. Elena, the woman he had thrown out like a criminal, the woman his son loved like a mother, the woman with eyes that hurt him because they looked like Catherine's. She had not only been framed, her husband had been killed by Victor, and Dominic had thrown her out, had believed Victoria, had let Elena be destroyed again without ever knowing. The file ended, a deadly silence. Then Dominic grabbed the unfinished whiskey glass on the desk and hurled it into the wall. The glass exploded, liquor spraying everywhere, but he did not care. 10 years, Dominic roared, his voice like a wounded animal. 10 years I trusted that bastard. 10 years I treated him like a brother, and he betrays me like this. Marco stood still, not daring to speak. He had never seen his boss lose control like this. Dominic turned, his gray eyes lit with fire. "Bring Adrian here. Tell him I need an update on the documents." Marco nodded and left. 10 minutes later, Adrian walked into the office, calm as ever. He had no idea he had just stepped into a lion's den. "Boss, you called for me. Sit down, Adrian." Dominic pointed to the chair across from him, his voice strangely calm. "Any progress on the documents?" Adrian sat, relaxed. "I'm tracing it, boss. I think Elena may have sold them to someone before she was caught. I'll find the buyer." "Is that so?" Dominic nodded slowly. "You're working very hard. It's my job, boss." Dominic stared at Adrian, at that hypocritical face, at those lying eyes. 10 years. 10 years he had trusted this man. Then he pulled out his phone and pressed play. Adrian's voice filled the room. "Victor is very pleased. He's using the documents to approach Medellin." Adrian's face went pale as a corpse. He sprang up, trying to run, but Marco was already blocking the door. "Boss, I can explain." "Explain what?" Dominic rose and stepped forward. "Explain how you sold me to Victor. Explain how you framed an innocent woman. Explain how you laughed about her husband's death." Adrian stumbled back, hitting Marco's chest. He turned as if to throw a punch, but Marco was faster. A hard fist slammed into his face. Adrian went down, blood spilling from his nose. 10 years, Adrian, Dominic said, his voice cold as ice. 10 years I trusted you. I gave you everything. And you betrayed me for what? Money, power. What did Victor promise you? Adrian lay on the floor, shaking. Victor will kill you. You don't know how powerful he is. Dominic crouched, grabbed Adrian by the collar, and hauled him up. Victor won't get the chance, because he'll be busy dealing with me. He threw Adrian back down. Marco, lock him up. I'll deal with him later. Marco nodded and dragged Adrian away like a trash bag. Dominic stood there, breathing hard, fighting to control the rage burning through him. Then he remembered there was still one more. Marco, he called. Where is Victoria? Marco stopped, his face dark. She disappeared about 20 minutes ago. Boss, someone saw her get into an unfamiliar car. Victor's car. Dominic clenched his jaw. Victoria had run. She had run to Victor, and that meant she knew everything had been exposed. But worse than that, it meant Elena was in danger. Victoria ran like a madwoman through the night streets of New York, her heart hammering against her ribs. She knew it was over the instant she saw Marco heading toward Dominic's room with that look on his face. She knew the little boy Luca had done something. She did not wait to confirm it. She got in her car and fled to the only place she could go. To Viktor Petrov. Victor's warehouse sat on the outskirts of Brooklyn, an old building on the outside. But inside it was a hardened fortress with dozens of gunmen standing guard. Victoria was led in, through dark corridors, to the room where Victor waited. The Russian Mafia boss sat behind an oak desk, silver hair slicked back, gray eyes cold as ice as he watched her step inside. Dominic knows, Victoria screamed, nearly frantic. Adrian has been arrested. The little boy Luca recorded everything. It's all exposed. Victor did not move. He only looked at Victoria with a calm so eerie it made the air feel thinner. I know. Victoria froze. You know? Adrian was always a piece I could sacrifice, Victor said, his voice flat and cold. Just like you. Victoria's face drained of color. You... What did you say? Victor rose and came around the desk, walking toward her. Victoria stepped back, and for the first time she felt real fear of this man. You thought you mattered? Victor curled his mouth. You were a tool to reach Blackwood. Now that tool has been exposed. Are you going to kill me? Victoria trembled, her voice on the edge of a sob. Victor stopped, looked her up and down, then gave a contemptuous chuckle. Relax, you are still useful. For now. Victoria exhaled, but the relief did not last. She knew Victor never gave anyone anything for free. If he kept her alive, it meant he needed her for something. That Mexican girl, Victoria snarled, sudden rage exploding out of her. It's all because of her. If she hadn't been there, Luca would never have done this. If she hadn't been there, Dominic would never have suspected anything. She ruined everything. Victor watched her, and something like amusement flickered in his eyes. You hate her that much? I want her dead, Victoria shouted. I want her to suffer. I want her to know what it feels like to lose everything. Victor smiled, the smile of a snake. Then let me give you a chance to get your revenge. And at the same time, make Blackwood hurt. Victoria looked at him, her eyes lighting up. What do you mean? Victor turned back to the desk and poured himself a glass of vodka. I have been watching Blackwood for a while. He is not the kind of man who breaks easily, but he has one weakness. He took a sip. That girl, Elena. Elena? Victoria frowned. She is only a servant. Not only that, Victor shook his head. I have seen the way Blackwood looks at her. He cares about her more than he realizes, and his son loves her like a real mother. Victor set the glass down and turned to Victoria. We take her, and we break Blackwood from the inside. He will act recklessly. He will make mistakes. He will come here alone to save her. And then we finish him. Victoria smiled, the most vicious smile she had ever worn. I like this plan. Half an hour later, 2 black cars stopped in front of Elena's apartment in Brooklyn. 4 men stepped out, dressed in black, faces cold as stone. They did not need to knock. They kicked the door in. Elena was asleep when the noise tore her awake. She jolted up. But before she could react, a hand clamped over her mouth. She fought, tried to scream, tried to strike back. She bit the attacker's hand, clawed at another man's face, kicked a third one away. But there were too many of them, too strong. A punch to her stomach folded her in half. A cloth was forced over her mouth. A rope cinched tight around her wrists. Then darkness swallowed her whole. When Elena came to, she did not know where she was. The room was pitch dark and damp, reeking of rust and machine oil. Her hands were tied behind her back, her mouth sealed with tape. She struggled, but the ropes were too tight. Then she heard footsteps, and when the light snapped on, She saw Victoria standing in front of her. "Do you remember me, Elena?" Victoria smiled, the smile of a madwoman. "Last time you were standing in my estate, protected by Dominic, but now it's different." She bent down, gripped Elena's chin, and forced her to look straight into her eyes. "Now it's my turn, and I will make sure you suffer 1,000 times more than what you made me endure." Elena could not speak through the tape, but her eyes held no fear. She stared back at Victoria, steady and full of contempt. It only drove Victoria more insane. "You think you're brave?" Victoria slapped Elena across the face. "We'll see how long your bravery lasts." The door opened. Victoria turned, and Viktor Petrov stepped in, gray eyes cold and empty as he looked at Elena. "Mrs. Reyes," he said, as if he were talking about the weather. "At last we meet. I have wanted to speak with you for a long time." He walked closer and stopped right in front of her. "About your husband. Miguel, right?" Elena went still. Her heart seemed to stop when she heard that name from his mouth. Victor smiled, a cruel, merciless smile. He was in the wrong place, at the wrong time. He saw what he was not meant to see, and I do not leave witnesses. He leaned down, close to Elena's face. "Just like you now." Dominic's phone vibrated in the middle of the night. He glanced at the screen and saw a video message from an unknown number. He tapped it open, and the blood in his veins seemed to turn to ice. Elena sat on an iron chair, her hands bound behind her back, her face bruised, her hair tangled. A gun was aimed straight at her head, and beside her, Viktor Petrov was smiling into the camera. "Blackwood," Victor's voice came through, cold and triumphant. "I have something of yours. Come alone, or she dies. You have 2 hours." The video ended. Dominic stood there, his hand trembling around the phone. For the first time in 20 years, the men around him saw their boss lose his composure. The most powerful mafia boss in New York, the man who had built an empire from nothing, the man who never trembled before anyone, was shaking like an ordinary man about to lose something precious. Marco stepped closer, his voice low. "Boss, it's a trap. Victor wants you to come alone so he can kill you. We can't follow his terms." "I know it's a trap," Dominic said, his voice rough. "But I can't let her die, Marco. Not after what I did to her." He looked down at the phone, at the image of Elena tied up, beaten, with a gun to her head. "I threw her out like a criminal. I believed a traitor instead of believing my own son. I destroyed her life." He lifted his gaze, his gray eyes filled with pain and resolve. "And her husband was killed because of Victor. She has lost everything, and I made it worse. I can't let her die, even if it costs me my life." "Boss, get the men ready." Dominic cut him off. "We are not going alone. We're going the Blackwood way." Small footsteps sounded on the stairs. Luca ran down, eyes red, his face streaked with tears. "Dad, you have to save Elena. I heard everything. They took her." Dominic dropped to his knees and caught his son in his arms. "I know, son. I'm going to save her. Promise me." Luca clutched his father's shirt, trembling. "Promise you'll bring her back. I can't lose her. I can't lose anyone else." Dominic held his boy tighter, his heart squeezed as if by a fist. This 7-year-old had lost his mother, had almost lost Elena, had been forced to see things no child should ever see, and still he was braver than any grown man Dominic had ever known. "I promise," Dominic whispered. "I will bring Elena back." "Dad," Luca said softly, his voice shaking. "Victor killed Elena's husband. I heard them say it. Miguel Reyes. He killed him." Dominic hugged him closer. "I know, son. I heard the recording. Will you make him pay?" Dominic looked into his son's eyes, those brown eyes filled with hope and trust. "I will. I promise. Victor will pay for everything he has done." He stood and turned to Marco. "Call every one of our men. Tonight, we end Viktor Petrov." 1 hour later, Dominic Blackwood's convoy moved toward Victor's warehouse on the outskirts of Brooklyn. 10 vehicles, 40 men, all armed to the teeth. Dominic sat in the lead car, eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. He did not know how many men Victor had, did not know where in that warehouse she was being held, did not know if he would reach her in time, but he knew one thing. He would not let Elena die, even if he had to burn all of New York to the ground. The convoy stopped 1 street away from the warehouse. Dominic gave orders over the radio. "Marco, lead the main team through the front. Make noise. Draw their attention. I'm going in through the back." "Boss, going alone is dangerous." "That's an order." Dominic checked his gun and slipped it into his waistband. "Elena is in there. I'll find her while you keep Victor's men busy." Marco nodded, unhappy but obedient. Understood, boss. Be careful. Gunfire erupted like fireworks as Marco's team hit the front entrance. Flashes of light tore through the night. Screams, running feet, shattering glass. In the chaos, Dominic slipped in through the back, moving like a shadow through dark corridors. He had studied this warehouse for a long time. Knew Victor kept an underground holding room on the lowest level. That was where Elena was being kept. Dominic went down the stairs, his gun steady in his hand. 2 guards appeared. He dropped them before they could react. 2 shots. Silence, the work of a suppressor. He kept moving, his heart pounding. Elena. She had to be alive. She had to be alive. He reached a steel door and heard voices inside. Victoria's voice. Do you think anyone is coming to save you? Dominic? He'll be dead before he ever gets in here. And you'll die with him. Dominic did not wait. He stepped back once, then kicked the door hard. The steel door burst open and light spilled in. Dominic stood there, gun raised, his eyes sweeping the room. Elena sat in the chair, her hands bound, her face bruised, but her brown eyes brightened when she saw him, and Victoria stood beside her, a gun aimed straight at Elena's head. "One more step," Victoria screamed, eyes wild, "and I'll blow her head apart." Dominic stood facing Victoria, his gun trained on her, but he could not fire because Elena was being used as a shield. Victoria laughed, wild and unhinged, her eyes bloodshot, the gun shaking in her hand, but still pressed tight against Elena's temple. "Put the gun down, Dominic," Victoria screamed. "Put it down or I shoot her right now." Dominic did not move. He looked at Elena, into those brown eyes fixed on him, not with fear, but with trust. She trusted him. After everything he had done to her, she still trusted him. "Victoria," Dominic said, his voice strangely calm, "do you really think you can get out of here? My men are everywhere. You kill her, and you die too." "I don't need to get out," Victoria shrieked. "I only need her dead. She ruined everything. She stole everything from me." The back door opened. Viktor Petrov stepped in, followed by 4 gunmen. The Russian Mafia boss looked at Dominic, a smug smile on his mouth. "Blackwood. Predictable. You came for a maid." Dominic did not turn. His gun stayed on Victoria. "She isn't a maid. She is family." Elena stared at Dominic, stunned. Family. He had just called her family. Victor laughed, the sound echoing through the damp room. Family. How touching. The coldest Mafia boss in New York has a heart. He stepped closer, stopping beside Victoria, looking down at Elena. "Mrs. Reyes, did you know your husband worked near one of my warehouses?" Elena looked up, eyes wide. "What did you say?" "Miguel." Victor savored the name as if it were a fine drink. "He worked the night shift at the convenience store across from my warehouse. One night, he saw a shipment. Cocaine, 200 kilos. He tilted his head, his voice as casual as a weather report. I couldn't let him talk." Elena went still. Her entire body felt locked in ice. "That so-called robbery 3 years ago." Victor smiled. "That was me. My men handled it cleanly. The police found nothing. The file was closed. Perfect." Tears slid down Elena's cheeks, but she did not break. She lifted her chin and looked Victor straight in the eye, her gaze burning with hatred. "You killed my husband." Her voice trembled, but it carried a fierce strength. "You destroyed my family. You made my daughter grow up without a father, and you stand there smiling." Victor shrugged. "Business is business, Mrs. Reyes. Nothing personal." "No." Elena's voice rose, raw and shaking, her eyes red. "This isn't business. This is murder, and you will pay." Victor gave a cold chuckle. "Pay? You're tied to a chair, Mrs. Reyes. You're not in a position to threaten anyone." "She isn't," Dominic said, his voice turning to ice. "But I am." Victor turned to Dominic, one eyebrow lifting. "You're at a disadvantage, Blackwood. 4 of my men, and Victoria with a gun to your girl's head. What are you going to do?" Dominic smiled, the first smile of the night. "You think I came here alone?" And in that exact moment, the back door blew open. Marco led Blackwood's men flooding in, guns trained on Victor's crew. From the front entrance, another team appeared. Victor and his men were surrounded from every direction. Victor's face changed. "You planned this. I've been in this game longer than you, Victor." Dominic stepped forward. "You thought I would walk into your trap like a lamb. I'm Dominic Blackwood. I don't move without a backup plan." Victor drew his gun, trying to fire, but Marco was faster. One shot to Victor's shoulder and he went down, his gun skittering away. His men tried to fight, but they were overwhelmed. Within seconds, all of them were restrained. Victoria looked around, panicked. She still kept the gun at Elena's head, but her hand was shaking violently now. "Don't come closer. I'll shoot. I swear I'll shoot." "Victoria." Dominic moved toward her, slow, one step at a time. "It's over. Put the gun down." "No," Victoria screamed, tears streaming down her face. "I can't lose. Not like this. Not because of a Mexican maid." "Put the gun down," Dominic repeated, his voice colder. "That's the last time I'm going to say it." Victoria looked at Dominic, looked at his men, looked at Victor groaning on the floor. She knew it was done. The gun slipped from her fingers and hit the ground. Victoria crumpled, sobbing. "Dominic, please. I love you. I did everything for you. For us." "You love my money," Dominic said flatly. "Not me. No, I'm pregnant. Your baby," Victoria cried, desperate. The room went so still it felt like the air had stopped. Dominic looked down at Victoria, his eyes unmoved. "That is impossible," Dominic said, his voice cold and sharp as a blade. "I had a vasectomy 3 years ago, right after Catherine died. I can't have any more children." Victoria turned deathly pale. Her last lie had been stripped bare. "Take her," Dominic ordered. "Along with Victor. I'll deal with them later." Marco nodded and signaled his men. Victoria and Victor were dragged away, their crying and cursing echoing down the corridor until it faded. The room fell quiet again. Only Dominic and Elena remained. Dominic stepped closer and dropped to his knees in front of Elena. He gently peeled the tape from her mouth, then untied her wrists. His movements were slow, careful, as if she were something precious he was afraid to break. "I'm sorry," Dominic said, his voice rough. "For everything. For not believing you. For throwing you out. For letting you suffer all of this." Elena looked at him, at the most powerful Mafia boss in New York, kneeling in front of her, his gray eyes full of pain and remorse. And then she saw something she never thought she would see. Tears. Tears sliding down Dominic Blackwood's cheeks. The man all of New York feared. The man everyone thought had no heart. "I'm sorry," he said again, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry about Miguel. I'm sorry about everything." Elena said nothing. She only sat there, tears running down her face, watching the man who had once destroyed her, now crying for her. Dawn broke as Dominic Blackwood's convoy returned to the estate. The pale gold light of the morning slipped through the trees, as if nature itself were signaling a new beginning after a long, black night. Elena sat in the car beside Dominic, silent the entire way. She was exhausted to the bone, her face still bruised, her wrists still aching from the ropes, but she was alive. She was still alive. Viktor Petrov and his men had been handled under Mafia law, a law whose details never reached the outside world. The only certainty was that Viktor would never be a threat to anyone again. His empire had collapsed in a single night, and the people who once followed him were now scattering like rats. As for Victoria, she was being kept in the car behind them, waiting for her fate. When they arrived at the estate, Dominic led Elena into the large sitting room. Victoria was brought in afterward, wrists cuffed, face swollen from crying, hair in disarray, not a trace left of the poised future lady of the house. She looked pathetic. She looked broken. She looked like what she truly was, a defeated woman. Dominic turned to Elena, his voice gentle. "What do you want me to do with her?" Elena blinked, surprised. "You're asking me." "She destroyed your life," Dominic said. "You deserve to decide." Elena looked at Victoria, at the woman who had framed her, who had taken her job, her dignity, nearly her life. The woman who had laughed about her husband's death as if it were a joke. Elena could have asked Dominic to kill Victoria. He would have done it. One word, and Victoria would vanish from the world forever. But Elena was not a murderer. She did not want to become what Victoria and Victor had been. "I want her to live," Elena said, her voice calm and clear. Victoria lifted her head, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "I want her to live," Elena continued, "and watch everything she ever dreamed of turn to smoke. I want her to live and know she lost to a Mexican maid. I want her to wake up every day, look in the mirror, and know she is nothing. That is the heaviest punishment." Victoria's face drained white. She had prepared herself for death, but she had not prepared for this, living as if already dead. Dominic nodded. "Take her away. Exile her from New York. Make sure she has nothing. No money, no home, no identity, nothing." Victoria was dragged out, her sobs echoing, but no one turned back to look. She would live, but she would live like a ghost, nothing more. When the room held only the two of them, Dominic turned to Elena. He stood facing her, gray eyes full of regret and pain. "I owe you more than an apology," he said, his voice rough. "You saved my life," Elena replied. "After I nearly destroyed it." Dominic shook his head. "I trusted the wrong people. I threw you out like a criminal. I made you suffer things no one should ever suffer. We were all deceived," Elena said softly. "Victoria deceived you. Adrian deceived you. Victor deceived all of us." She paused, her voice catching. "Victor. Miguel." And then Elena cried. For the first time since learning the truth about her husband's death. She cried, not the quiet tears of the nights before, but deep, broken sobs, the crying of a woman finally released from a weight she had carried for 3 years. Miguel did not die in a robbery. Miguel died because he saw something he was never meant to see. And now she knew the truth. Now she knew who had killed her husband. Dominic stood there, uncertain, not knowing what to do. He was not used to emotion, not used to comforting anyone. But then he stepped closer, hesitated, and gently placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. "Miguel will not have died for nothing," he said, steady and firm. "I promise you. The man who killed him has paid, and I will make sure his family is protected. Your daughter, your mother, all of them." Elena looked up at Dominic through her tears. She did not speak, but her eyes said everything. "Thank you." Small footsteps sounded on the stairs. Luca ran down, his face lighting up when he saw Elena. "Elena, you're okay. I was so scared." He threw his arms around her, tears streaming down his face. Elena dropped to her knees and hugged him close, tears still falling, but now they were tears of happiness. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm okay. Because of you. Because of me." Luca blinked, surprised. "You called Marco and let him hear the truth. You saved me. You are my little hero." Luca smiled through tears and hugged Elena tighter. Dominic stood beside them, watching Elena hold his son. He watched the way she smoothed Luca's hair, the way she kissed his forehead, the way she spoke the words of love Luca had been missing for 3 years since Catherine died. And for the first time in many years, Dominic Blackwood felt something warm bloom in his chest, something he thought had died with Catherine. Hope. A month passed. The Blackwood estate was no longer the cold place filled with shadows it used to be. Now laughter echoed through the hallways. The kitchen carried the rich scent of warm food, and sunlight poured through windows that were kept wide open. The house had changed, or rather, the people inside it had changed. That morning, Dominic Blackwood gathered every employee in the estate. From the butler to the gardener, from the chef to the security team, everyone stood in the grand hall, waiting. Dominic stepped forward, Elena beside him, and Luca holding her hand tightly. "I have an announcement," Dominic said, his voice carrying through the room. 1 month ago, Elena Reyes was falsely accused. She did not steal anything. She is completely innocent. The real culprits have been punished. He paused, looked at Elena, then looked back at the crowd. "From today on, Elena Reyes is a respected member of this family. Anyone who mistreats her is mistreating me." Silence. Then applause rose, soft at first, then louder, louder. Elena stood there with tears in her eyes, feeling as if an enormous weight had just been lifted from her shoulders. She had been cleared, publicly, in front of everyone. A few days later, Dominic took Elena to the cemetery. It was a quiet afternoon, gentle sun, wind moving through rows of green trees. Elena stood before Miguel's grave, holding a bouquet of sunflowers, the flower he had loved. "My love," she whispered, setting the flowers down on the stone. "I know the truth now. I know you didn't die in a robbery. I know who did this to you." Tears ran down her cheeks, but they were not the tears of raw pain anymore. They were the tears of release. "He paid for it, my love. You can rest now. Mia and I will be okay. I promise." Elena stayed there for a long time, speaking to Miguel, telling him about Mia, about life, about the future. Dominic stood a few steps away, silent, waiting, not rushing her, not pressing her. When Elena turned back, she looked at him with eyes still red, but peaceful. "Thank you for bringing me here. It's the least I can do," Dominic said softly. "Miguel deserved to be visited, and you deserve to say goodbye the right way." They left the cemetery in silence, but it was a gentle silence, not a heavy one. A week after that, in the garden of the Blackwood estate, Elena and Luca were kneeling in the dirt, hands smeared with mud, sweat dotting their faces. They were planting sunflowers, dozens of tiny shoots lined in a long row along the walkway. "Elena, how tall do you think they'll grow?" Luca asked, his eyes shining. Very tall. Elena laughed. Sunflowers can grow taller than me. And they always turn toward the sun. Why? Because it's their instinct. No matter how thick the darkness is, they still search for light. Just like us. Footsteps sounded behind them. Elena turned, surprised to see Dominic stepping into the garden. But it was not Dominic as she had known him. Not the cold Mafia boss in a black suit. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and sneakers on his feet. For the first time, he looked like an ordinary man. "Need some help?" Dominic asked, a trace of awkwardness in his voice, as if he was not used to saying things like that. Luca burst into laughter. "Dad, you're going to get all dirty." "That's fine," Dominic said, kneeling beside his son. "Some things are worth getting dirty for." He looked at Elena, gray eyes meeting her brown ones. She gave him a small smile, and he smiled back. A rare smile she had never seen from him before. The three of them planted flowers together, hands muddy, faces damp with sweat, laughing and talking without stopping. When the last sunflower was in the ground, Luca sat down between Elena and Dominic, looking at their work with pride. Then the boy turned to Elena, his brown eyes suddenly serious. "Elena, I want to ask you something. Ask me, sweetheart." "Can I call you Mom, Elena?" Elena went still. She looked at Luca, at the hope shining in his eyes, and her heart felt like it opened all at once. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" "I'm sure," Luca nodded. "You are my real mom. You stayed with me. You never left me." Elena hugged Luca tightly, tears streaming down her face. "If that's what you want, then that's what I will be. Your mom, Elena." Dominic sat beside them, watching Elena hold his son. He lifted his eyes to the blue sky, and inside him a voice seemed to whisper, "Catherine, I think I found someone who can heal us, me and our boy." That night, the three of them ate dinner together in the dining room. Not a lavish feast with dozens of courses, but a simple family meal. Elena cooked herself. Luca talked about school, about friends, about the funny things he had learned. Dominic listened, asked questions, laughed when his son made a joke. Elena sat there watching the two of them, and she knew she had found where she belonged. No more master and servant, no more shadows, no more lies and betrayal. Only light, only family. Outside, the sunflowers Luca and Elena had planted had begun to rise, turning their faces toward the sun. And inside the estate that had once held only darkness and death, life had bloomed again. For Elena Reyes, the woman who lost her husband to a killer's bullet, the woman who was blamed for a crime she never committed, the woman who was dragged through hell and came back, the nightmare had finally ended. The truth had won. Justice had been done. And somewhere, Miguel Reyes could finally rest. She did not only clear her name. She did not only find a family. She found a home. The story of Elena and Dominic leaves us with a deep lesson about the power of truth and resilience. No matter how dark the hardship life throws at us, keep believing the truth will find a way to rise, just as sunflowers always turn toward the sun. Never lose faith in yourself. Never let anyone define your worth. And remember that real family is not only the people who share your blood, but the people who stay when everyone else turns away. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, tap like, and share this video so more people can hear meaningful stories every day. How did you feel about this story? Have you ever been misunderstood or falsely accused in your own life? Share with us in the comments below. We truly want to hear what you feel from the deepest part of your heart. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a life filled with joy, peace, and happiness every day. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.